G'day folks, Chris McLean back with yet another episode here on the show. And in the studio today, I've got Ryan from TheHypeSociety. They provide their clients with the perfect mix of strategy, engagement, and performance to drive the best client experience. Excited to get into all things hype. Ryan, thanks for being on the show, mate.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be here.
Pleasure to have you here. So what is it exactly that the Hype Society does? Are you on the, if I had to guess, I'd assume you're sort of on the social side of things, but I could be wrong. Take us through what you do and how this all got started for you.
Yeah, sure thing. So I've been in marketing now for the best part of 20 years. I started in helping business owners navigate print-based marketing back in the census, white and yellow pages days. But really what led me into the digital space was really that attribution and performance and the transparency of that performance. And the Hype Society is really born out of helping clients strategically, but also, being an integral part of their organization and their business, and then also helping them understand how to drive real performance out of digital marketing, whether it be through social, whether it be through performance paid, Google Ads, SEO, content marketing, video marketing, you name it. We sort of do it at the Hype Society, and the society component of what we've built is really about the network that has been built, with me, but also with our team, so we can help our customers navigate those murky waters of selecting the right partners as well within the Hype Society.
Yeah, right. So like essentially a network of providers or sort of individual contractors. Sort of how does that?
Yeah.
What's that
Both.
makeup look like?
Yeah, so we have our core hype team. So we have, internal SEO, internal PPC, internal social, internal strategy, internal performance marketing managers. But then outside of that, we have content creators. So whether it be video production, whether it be commercial photography, whether it be sort of ghostwriting or journalistic style content production. So developers, designers, is where the hype's sort of the society comes into play.
Yeah, right. Nice. And it sounds like you're very much sort of data driven, sort of analytics based, that you're using data to make those decisions and help brands to connect to the right people at the right time in the right channel. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, it would be accurate. So performance marketing is really the core of what we're passionate about, but we understand that to get to those performance outcomes, you really have to understand the content that's driving those outcomes. So that's where the content strategy, that's where the creative sort of elements come into play. And my business partner has a creative agency background, so he brings the sort of creative strategy and works with our design team to ensure that the content that we're producing will hit those performance elements or the outcomes that we're looking to drive for the client.
I find performance marketing an interesting term. It's kind of one of those terminologies that kind of gets thrown around. If you can, in your own words, can you what's your definition of performance in terms of performance marketing? What are we talking about? As you say, is it hitting KPIs? Is it hitting metrics? How would you define performance marketing as opposed to digital marketing or normal marketing?
Yeah, great question. And I think that performance marketing, sort of words get thrown around quite a lot. And I think that customers or clients, don't really sort of fully get what performance marketing is. But it's essentially exactly what you touched on. It's an agreed set of objectives that the campaign is set out to achieve over a particular time. And we also add a little bit of additional flavor to that by providing what we would call flexible performance retainers. So if a social campaign, isn't hitting its objectives, then we can then pivot that spend away from that particular component and then into, potentially a Google display campaign or a Google Ads campaign or an Instagram focus or LinkedIn and pull those other channels in to start, to ensure that the campaign is going to hit those overarching objectives rather than just saying, oh, well, I'm really sorry, but we missed those objectives for you this month. It's really about pulling out all all stops to make sure that the campaign is going to achieve the desired objectives.
Yeah, no, and do you take that performance through to your model as well? Or do you operate on a performance model where essentially you get paid for the results that you get? Do you run a performance model as well?
We do give customers the option, although they typically will do worse engaging in that model, because essentially we'll be clipping the ticket. It sounds great conceptually, but
Until
when we start to then break it down and say, if we do get you from 10 a month or 20 a month revenue to 50, and you're giving us 10% of that growth revenue, and that gets to 100 and gets to 200 over time, there's a lot of that revenue that's coming into the agency that wouldn't necessarily have to be there. We try and navigate those waters by understanding that that the plan and the strategy will drive the outcome, and we break it down into sort of bite-sized chunks, so the customer's never at incredible risk. We're not locking them into sort of really super long-term contracts until that relationship has been built, until the performance is there, and until we get to that point, what I sort of determine as money in, money out marketing. So we know that if a certain investment is going into the campaign, that an outcome is predictable that comes out the other side. And then once we're at that point, it really is about opportunity maximization and really making sure that we can continue to keep laying that cash in and driving that scalable performance out, which is sort of what we love to do, is getting those customers in through the sort of discovery and engagement phase into that sort of amplification and scale, which is really what they love as well, right? Then it's really a collaboration. It's a joint force to continue to drive their business.
Yeah, I find the performance model really interesting because that's a massive value add, right? I mean, if you are taking a client from doing 20K a month to 200 a month, right, you're probably worth 5% of that business. That's probably a pretty fair exchange for that growth, right? So, and so you're clipping the ticket at 5-10%, and they're doing 100, 200K. That's probably value from, like, I would pay that every month. If you came to me at the outset and said, "Hey, Chris, pay me 20 grand and I'll give you 100 on the back end," I'd pay you 20 grand every month.
you would think that, and at the time you definitely would. But over time, it actually feels like we've got our hand in your pocket, and that's just unfortunately what happens. Clients after 12 months or 18 months or 24 months, when they're continuing to have to rev share, they know that you're not doing that work. You're really getting the performance kickers for the work that you've previously done. They don't really align very well with it. They're really stuck in the day and the month to make that payment. So we try, we do have that option available, and we will be flexible around how we create the retainer. So we have a win-win scenario for the client, and for the TheHypeSociety. But the reality is we just want to get paid to do a great job and take the client on a journey. And really, after that investment anxiety component is removed from the conversation, and we can get them into opportunity gain or opportunity development mode, that's really what we're after. And it doesn't take too long to get to that point once you've got some runs on the board. So we try and de-risk them on the way in, pick the low-hanging fruit, and start to make those gains. And then, it's a collaborative effort after that.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting model. And you said if you look at it as a cash output, you say, like, I'm paying you. I was paying you 5 grand a month for essentially the same block of time, but now I'm paying you 20 grand for that same block of time. It's a shift from, like, I'm paying you time for money versus value, right?
Yeah.
And you're generating 200 grand worth of value for me, and I'm paying you 20 grand for that. Whereas back when it was a 5 grand, they were paying you 5 grand. If they were paying you 20 grand to make 20 grand, that's a different value proposition. So I find that value pricing component really interesting, and how you kind of can make that shift with clients and have them understand that value, right? You pay us 20, but we're giving you 200. That's a pretty good investment.
And there's clients that aren't on performance retainers that have, that we've seen 500% increases on, so, coming in at sort of 20 grand a month that are getting, 100,000 a month now, after sort of, even 3 or 4 months of campaign management.
Yeah, interesting. And yeah, that next piece. So you talk about that scaling and amplification piece. That's I guess that's where things get tricky and exciting at the same time. That can be the piece that I guess a lot of people are trying to run ads themselves. It can tend to be a bit easier to get results quick. You put some ads out, you get all this attention, you get some results. That scaling piece is where it can be quite difficult, right? So how do you turn that? I'm putting $1 in and getting 2 back. How do I make it? I put 1,000 in and get 100 out. How do you approach that? I guess technically, sort of managing the client through that processing, and where does the data aspect come into that? Of when are you able to make that decision to say this campaign is really scalable and this is how much we need to scale it at this point to make sure it's still going to be viable on the back end?
Comes down to the client's business model. If we look at e-commerce, it comes down to margin. If they've got $100 RRP on a product and they've got 60% margin, then the ROAS conversation is simpler. If they've got if they're selling stubby holders for $6.99 and they're producing them and having to sell. Produce them at $4, that's a wildly different sort of conversation. So, those conversations are specific to each client, what their margin is, their distribution, their GP on the products, and then it's the funnel to then dictate those return on ad spend metrics at each section, whether it be top, middle, and bottom of the funnel, and then looking at what's been spent for that month, including the management, revenue that's been made, the margin that comes out, and then what can continue to go back in to amplify the performance of that campaign. So we really do and are comfortable having those business strategy conversations with customers to understand that 5 times return on ad spend might sound great, but in reality you're only just eking out a profit. So we need to really understand their product set, the model, where they make the most margin, where and how the business is structured, to then set individual and specific KPIs and plans for each one of those clients. And then lead generation is a totally different kettle of fish, right? Lead generation is about how many leads have been generated, what the conversion rate is on those leads, what their operational costs are, the lifetime or annualized customer revenue is, into then how much are we paying for a lead. Like, it's all of those types of conversations that we would then structure and plan around.
Yeah, so it's very much a business finance conversation, right? You've really got to have that at least 101 or not, if not sort of 201 of financial modeling and business modeling to like all of those terms you've thrown out. Agencies operating in this space probably understand a lot, lifetime value and ROAS and all that kind of thing. But more creative agencies and branding agencies that don't deal with this real technical digital stuff might not have that capacity to really understand that. But it's as you're saying, it's critical to really get into the business, and not just say, oh, look, we're generating you all these leads, but either it's falling off at the back of the funnel, you're not converting them because they're crappy leads, or on that other side, we're generating, amazing ROAS, but that actually means you kind of just, you're not actually making that much profit in the business because we're doing it on the wrong product, or there's just not enough margin in that product, and you need to maybe go back and look at your manufacturing or look at your costs or look at other ways to increase the margin on that product. So having that and, that full business senses, it seems like it's really important.
Yeah, and then even educating clients to the fact that in a testing phase of a campaign, the goal might not even be to make money. You might actually be losing money for the first 4 to 6 weeks. We really want to test what creative is going to drive the best click-through rate, the best conversion rate. Work out whether your product is going to make sales, and then work out how we then expand from that point. So that's that's sometimes a difficult conversation to have with the client too, because they're like, oh well, what do you mean? Like, we're not going to make money. I'm coming to you to make money. Like, but it doesn't always work like that. So
that client handholding, that client expectation setting, and that early conversations, particularly for sort of how you're operating, is super important to have. Right, it's going great. Give us your money, and then they check in. You go, actually, we haven't generated anything this month, and you haven't had that conversation up front to say, look, this is how it's going to actually roll out. You might not expect a return for the first month, because this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. This is the process. Without that conversation, it can get pretty messy pretty quickly. Is that something you always kind of had baked in, or is that something you learned because you didn't do it originally?
I mean, it's certainly it's a journey, and the market continues to fragment as well. You know, we've got things like, you know, TikTok and Pinterest is starting to now, you know, trying to get into the sort of fashion game as well. You know, LinkedIn's an interesting beast to market on from a B2B standpoint. You know, YouTube, like there's so many different platforms that are available to market from. So there really has to be that strategic development, and, you know, realistic expectations need to be managed throughout that process, because sometimes they might not pay, you know, those initial dividends, but once you kind of once the recipe is set, you know, you can get some big upside.
Yeah. So do you tend to work with e-commerce brands, or do you have a wide range? So this kind of stuff works really well with e-commerce because you have that full financial visibility all the way to literally we can see who checked out and what they paid, versus, you know, performance can be harder to monitor, particularly a performance model when you're dealing with, I don't know, a car dealership or a high ticket product where you don't have that visibility on, right? We know how many leads we sent you, but we don't know what money you made on the back end. So you need to tell us so that we can take a clip of that money. That can be a much different setup for like a performance type model when you don't have the visibility you have on e-com, or a way to track how much they're actually making on sales on the back end. So do you deal specifically with e-com, or do you have a variety of client type?
We have a variety. E-com's great because the attribution is much easier, and the sales component is being delivered, you know, by the website itself. The downside to e-com is that the conversion rate's typically a lot lower than a service-driven website. So you do need to focus a lot more on things like conversion rate optimization, or the landing page, or the message, or the offer, and how those pages are structured. Also, that the funnel's more detailed because the consumer takes more education to convert, because they're making that transaction on the spot. So they both have upsides and downsides, where lead generation, the downside is the attribution. The downside is that, you know, if the sales component, like if people aren't answering the phone or booking appointments, or the salesperson's not great, then that, you know, impacts directly on the perception of how well the marketing's working. So, you know, we do the really, for us, there's a couple of specific personas that we're after. We're after a marketing manager that has a strategy, but may not have the expertise or the team to be able to deliver on that marketing strategy. And for us, what we look for is a brand that has a proven track record of success, that we are confident that we can improve upon. So things like, you know, startups and small businesses are typically a real challenge, because there's not a predictability. There's not a guarantee that the product itself or the business itself is going to be successful, and that's always a risk for us. You know, where you know, we have a proven track record of performance, and we need to make sure that we're aligning ourselves with the type of clients that we can provide the most amount of value, and then there's, you know, a high probability of growth and a long-term sustainable relationship. So that's what we're sort of looking for. And the same on an e-com standpoint. Like, there's a lot of startup e-com businesses that, you know, I look at and they come to us, and they need to do some work on their brand and their product before it's ready for market. So we're very upfront about the types of clients that we know that we're going to be able to work with, and we'll also support those clients by giving them some tips or some referrals to others that might be able to help them, you know, take the next step before they're ready for sort of working with a performance agency.
Yeah, I think that's a really prudent step, or really prudent sort of laneway to have in the business if you're trying to minimize the potential fail points, right? Essentially. in a client when you know we can do all the marketing and the product just might be crap, or the delivery is just not right yet, or there's too many potential failure points where you could get blamed for it, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And a client saying, "Oh, we're not getting results, we're not making sales." It's obviously not our product, right? Because our product's amazing. It must be the marketing, because again, that can happen when expectations aren't set correctly, or so in your case, but particularly on that performance model, best to avoid that as much as possible. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
It's not about necessarily protecting us from a brand perspective. It's more about the fact that we're setting up the client to fail, and that's not the right thing to do either.
Yeah, very true. So where do you see? Obviously, we see. We've seen iOS updates, and we've seen cookies disappearing and pixels dropping off and all these kind of changes. For someone in an agency that's very much predicated or requires that as granular tracking as possible, how are you seeing that playing out sort of from now over the next sort of 6 to 12 months? Is that impacting you, or are you just kind of adapting and finding new ways to get that granularity? How are these sorts of things affecting, and where do you see that sort of shifting over the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I think that there's a huge opportunity for someone or a company to work out attribution as from end to end. Like there's like Google Analytics will take it so far, Facebook pixel tracking will take it so far. If you're with HubSpot, their attribution model's decent, but it takes it so far. Like there's nothing that kind of ties, everything together other than some, really sort of enterprise focused platforms that require, heavy integration. So I think that that's still a work in progress. Because there are, like, as I sort of touched on before, a huge amount of different platforms that need to be sort of taken and stitched together to give you the real story. Yes, the iOS update was a big deal. Was it the atomic bomb that everyone sort of thought it would be? No. You can still get decent attribution. Is it as granular as what it was before? No. But you can still get some very, very high quality data around return on ad spend at a campaign, ad set, and at an ad level to see the performance indicatively of what's happening in those campaigns. So, I think that is it perfect? No. Is there enough data to make smart decisions available? Yes, there is, absolutely. And, you can only make those decisions based on the data that you have available. But I think data will continue to evolve and will get easier to aggregate as time goes by, because it still is a massive challenge for business owners, for marketers, and for agencies to be able to pull it all together and tell one story. Because your funnel, if it has, just the 3 steps from top, middle, and bottom of funnel, like even stitching all of that sort of data together, you'll have, Facebook claiming attribution on some of it, Google claiming attribution on some of it. There's an overlap of data, but that's where the gray sort of exists. But there's enough there to make decisions based on enough.
Yeah. I think it's again an interesting conversation, and it's the interesting aspect for me is that I guess real marketers, or people that really just understand fundamental marketing, can survive and adapt with less data, because there's gut feel and creative thinking and that kind of thing comes into it. You've done it long enough, you've got the experience, you can kind of model what's going to happen based on, okay, even if you don't have every single attribution, you can kind of look at it and have there's a bit of a feel once you genuinely just understand marketing and you get this stuff and you've done it, and you don't necessarily need the data to tell you where it's going to go, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. That's I think that comes into it. Yeah. Yeah, I think that definitely comes into it, but there's the pure commercial element as well. We spent this much money this month, which was the same as last month. However, we made more revenue on the site. So if nothing else changed and that same money went in and more money came out, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what a lot of business owners are concerned about. They don't care about the data. They don't care about, what happened in this funnel in the middle with ad set B. They really just want to know, how much did I spend? How much did I make? Was it more or less than last month or last year? And, that's a tick, and they can move on to the next thing.
Yeah, they're less concerned that ad set B was the one that had a 2% uptick versus ad set C,
and we get really excited about
this headline crushed it. Yeah, this headline was just it was amazing. They're like, did I make 20 grand or 30 grand? That's it. That's the outcome. So again, that's another interesting part of that is because there's so much information, because we have so many platforms, we can and particularly in funnels, you can massively overcomplicate this stuff, right? There can be that tendency to kind of get caught up in the detail and not have that capacity to sort of step back and go, right, money in, money out. That's the result, rather than going and looking at all the pieces. So it can be that we sort of overcomplicate this as marketers, because we want to do all this stuff and we want to have that granularity and have pixel perfection all the way through the funnel. But having that ability to step back and have more of that sort of 40,000 foot view and go, we spent this much, we made this much, bottom line. That's what the client's going to care about. So let's make that happen better every month.
And if, I would say 95% of our clients, that's how they think. Like when we have performance related whips, the top line numbers are the most important, and that's when I see them light up when we go, what a fantastic month. We're up, 15% month on month total revenue. Like that's what they're super happy about. Like they're interested in the rest of it, but like that's the thing that, keeps them coming back to the Hype Society week after week, month after month.
Yeah, exactly. That's what's going to keep them coming back and doing business with you, because you generate them cash in their business. That's what they want.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Thanks so much for jumping on. It's always really interesting to get into this sort of the nitty gritty of ROAS and attributions and all this kind of stuff and performance models. If people do want to connect with you, find out some more about you, where are some of the best places for them to do that?
Yeah, so the website or LinkedIn personally, feel free to send me a message with any questions. Any channel really. I'm sort of happy to connect anywhere.
Awesome. As always, I'll drop those into the show notes, so folks listening at home can connect with Ryan and learn more about the Hype Society, connect and learn more about performance marketing and all that kind of amazing stuff as well. Or if you're an agency that doesn't provide that, good to have somebody that understands this stuff at a really deep level. Super valuable insights, Ryan. Thanks so much for dropping by, mate. Good to chat. Hope it was exciting and interesting for the folks at home who can sort of nerd out and geek out on this stuff. As digital marketers, it's pretty exciting for us. But as I said, having that capability to understand from a business model perspective and understand that side of things, that's pretty sexy as well, particularly when you're having client conversations, right? I'm sure you can sort of speak to that. The granularity and the sexiness of data and all that stuff is great, but then combining that or layering that with business and finance fundamentals, that makes it a whole package.
Yeah, sure, it absolutely does. Yep.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for dropping by. Good to have you here. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in at home, and we'll catch you on the next one.